What's up, everybody? Welcome into another episode of the OBR Prospect Spotlight here on the OBR Streaming Network. I'm your host, Jacob, joined this week by the awesome Sam Penix. What's going on, man?
Not too much, just getting into draft season.
It's
Can't
coming a
wait
little
to whatever.
way too November 15th as we record this. It's like I do draft for the OBR all year long, so like it's not crazy for me to do it, but I'm now finding a lot of other people that have started to in the brown spaces that have started doing the work on it because that's just where we're at.
Just like old times. Like
It's like riding a bike, right? Like it's like, oh yeah,
exactly.
I remember how that is. Guys, if you check us out on YouTube, please hit that subscribe button, that thumbs up. We appreciate you a bunch. The YouTube has been absolutely exploding. So we really appreciate that, guys. We're going to dive in today on updated top quarterbacks. Sam and I are working on three-part series over on the OBR, writing this up and putting some film with most of these quarterbacks. Part one's already up. Tier one might be up by the time you read this. I'm not sure, or by the time you watch this on Saturday morning. So but we're going to go through 15. We got 15. Is that right? We're doing 15
I think
quarterbacks
so.
on that list. So we're getting our way, working our way through that. So we'll check it out. But we want to talk about the top three guys, and then we're going to each give you a guy that we really like outside of the top three. And just kind of go from there. So Sam, I'll give you the floor, man. It doesn't have to be in order 1, 2, 3. You can pick whichever one of those guys you like and you want to start with. But I'll give you the floor first.
Yeah, I mean, let's go in order of the big board, right?
Yeah.
Consensus QB1 right now, I think is, I can find it here on NFL Mock Draft Database. The consensus QB1 is Shedeur Sanders. And at this point, I think he's my QB1. That's not a hill that I'm willing to die on right now because obviously there's still a lot of season left. We've got the whole off season to scout and everything. He's not the guy you're going to want to go with if you're looking for, I want the highest ceiling, I want the most dynamic athlete, I want the biggest arm. It's just not him. He doesn't have that physical skill set, but what he does have is, I think, just a natural ability to play the quarterback position. He knows what he's doing, and I think he's a talented thrower of the football. That doesn't mean he has the biggest arm because he definitely doesn't, especially when pushing the ball 20-ish yards down the field or further. But he's accurate. He places the ball pretty well as far as giving his guys a chance to get yards after the catch. And I think he's just all around, if like total package, fewest major red flags, I think is his profile. And I think with a lot of these guys in this class, they all have some pretty big disadvantages to them. Because this is just at this point considered a weaker QB class than recent years. And I think Sanders might have the fewest of those big issues.
Yeah.
And I think just the more that I watch quarterbacks, the more that I do scouting year over year, I keep gravitating towards, okay, some of these guys are going to catch my eye with the things that they can do, off platform, out of structure, the big flashy play, huge arm, all these things. But what are the skill sets? What are the things that are going to be most consistently translatable to the NFL? And I think like the Browns are a great example of this because for the past 3 years, you've watched a quarterback who just isn't able to do those things in structure. Maybe here or there'll be a nice play off platform, outside of the pocket, whatever, make something happen. But on the down to down basis, where it's just executing what's there schematically, that hasn't been happening. And I think that's where I'm looking for most is, okay, can you do what you're asked to do on a consistent basis? And we'll get to, some guys later on here who can do that and do some things outside of structure. But I think as far as which of the guys in this class is going to be able to do the things he's asked on a consistent basis the most? I think it has to be Sanders, and I think that's why, for me at least right now, he's in the lead.
Yeah, I think when you talk about Sanders, I think you talk about the most polished prospect. I think in this quarterback class, and in one of the most risk adverse. You talk about doing the things that you're asking him to do. He's tied for first in the nation right now with adjusted completion percentage. He's got an 81.9 adjusted completion percentage, and he's also first in the lowest turnover worthy play percentage in the nation. He's only got 1.2% turnover worthy plays. Now, he's tied for 19th when it comes to big time throw rate, which is really plays off what you're talking about. He's not the most physically gifted guy you're gonna. And there's a fire or something. I don't know if you guys could hear that, the sirens that were going off there for a second. But yeah, 5.4% big time throw rate, which is still, he can make those throws. He's got an NFL arm. I was listening to Todd McShay talk about it earlier. Like, some people want to say he's got a rifle for an arm. I don't think that's the case. I don't think he's got like a noodle arm. Like, he can push it downfield and in the intermediate game pretty well, but he's just a really, I think, if you're looking for a guy the most pro ready that you can just step in and do, as you said, what you ask him to do, I think that's Shedeur. I think it's that plain and simple for me. So
Yeah,
I
I
yeah,
think just the way to describe him is good. Like,
yeah,
it's not amazing. It's not, whoa, like I can't believe this. We have to get this guy, but he's just good. He's all around good. There are concerns with his profile. I think he struggles under pressure, like most quarterbacks do. And he's the kind of guy to, instead of like panicking and throwing the ball quicker to get rid of it, he's the kind of guy who's going to hold it and try to make something happen, which we've seen doesn't really work well. Um, so that's a concern. That's something he's going to have to try to figure out and polish and get coached up on. Um, he also, it's kind of weird because I think his long speed is better than his kind of like acceleration or short area quickness.
it
And
is.
I think that's like reverse of how I would ideally want it, because if you let him get a running lane, he can get up to speed and it's like, okay, like he can move, but within the pocket, he's he's not a statue, but he's not a guy who's going to like make a bunch of people miss and escape pressure. Like, he's pretty easily caught from behind, especially, within maybe like 5 yards of the line of scrimmage. So I think that limits his ability to create out of structure and with pressure, and then that exacerbates the problem of holding onto the ball and trying to make something happen. So that's something to look at. I think that might be his biggest red flag on tape for me right now. And I think the rest of it is just all off field, right? Like,
Yeah.
do you want to get involved with the kind of circus that it's going to follow him? And some of it's not his fault, some of it is self-created. Um, it's nothing, like we've dealt with currently, on the
No,
Browns, but
no, no.
it's still a concern. It's like, okay, you just spent 3+ years dealing with all this attention and coverage that's really been a huge distraction from just the on-field football product of the team. Do you want to continue on with that in a different light, but it's still the same, same base thing is a team distraction. And when it comes to the most important position on the field, I think that's something to consider.
Yeah, his to touch on what you talked about, his average time to throw is 2.92 seconds. That's 76th in the nation, and his pressure to sack conversion rate is over 20%.
Mhm.
So over a fifth of the time that you pressure him, you sack him. And now some of that's because his offensive line sucks. But although I think his left tackle has played really well as of late. All right, let's shift a little bit, man. Let's I'll kick it back to you if you want to start here. Let's talk about Cam Ward.
Yeah, he's the guy who I think has maybe the most all-around talent in the class. When you're talking from a physical perspective, as well as being able to just throw the football. Um, like, his highlight reel is pretty ridiculous. Like, he can do some really special things. extending plays, just like he's got a really strong arm. He can make some magic happen. The thing with him is, can he do a good job just standing within the pocket and just delivering the ball? Because that's not where he creates the majority of his big plays. That happens when things break down around him. He's got to escape, scramble around the pocket, run around for 10 seconds, and then make this crazy play, which is special. Like that, if you have a guy who can do that, that's awesome. But for me, at least, I think that's secondary to, okay, can you just do what we ask you to do on a consistent basis first? And then if you can add that extra stuff after the fact, wonderful. That makes me even happier. So I think figuring out if Ward is going to be able to operate a NFL offense from within structure consistently, effectively, I think that's the biggest question with him. And I think some teams will decide, like, we don't really see enough of that in college from this guy. And granted, I don't know that the Miami offense is necessarily the most conducive to that translating to the game. So that's definitely some projection you got to do as a coaching staff and scouting department. But I think that's the biggest question with him. And I think he's going to be a pretty polarizing and divisive prospect, especially, once draft time gets closer.
He's absolutely the most volatile in terms of the conversation around him. Like, you either love him or you think he's a bum. Like, it doesn't, like, at least on social media, that is anytime I put anything out about Cam Ward, I either get, yeah, QB1 or no, QB12 or something just absolutely outrageous. Like, I agree, man, his arm talent is absurd. When I was cutting up some Cam Ward tape for the article version of this on the OBR, there's a throw in the little like 3-minute clip that I made that this was actually last year in 2023 when he was with Washington State playing against Oregon, where he scrambles out against, like, I think he's running to his left. I don't even think he's running to his right. And he stops and he just flicks the ball about 35 yards down the field, just flicks it, just hits the guy right in stride, runs it down the sideline. And you're like, not many guys can do that. Like, that is outrageous. He's got a big time throw rate of 6.1%. Like, that's tied for 5th. He's also 37th in turnover worthy play percentage at nearly 3%. That dude is a good old fashioned gunslinger. There is no other way to his pressure. You look at this, like his passing grade for PFF this year, 89. Intermediate 91, deep grade is a 93, no pressure is a 92. Then you get to his pressure grade, it's a 55. It is a stark drop. You talked about him in structure. I will say that I think he's gotten better this year. I think from what he was at Washington State to what he is now at Miami, it's better. It's still not there. You're 100% right. It's still not. There are too many times where he's kind of falling away, drifting away, throwing the ball off his back foot, kind of as he fades from pressure and from the pocket. And he's got the arm to make up for that most of the time. That's not going to fly in the NFL. People are going to see that on the tape, and they're just going to start undercutting routes and start just jumping balls and taking it back. It's impressive to me that he's only thrown 6 interceptions. I thought that number was higher. Like, I was just looking at some of his numbers yesterday, and I was like, whoa. I know he's got some fumbles in there too. But he's got some dropped interceptions, as made apparent by the 2.9% turnover worthy play. If you're looking for ceiling, he's not number one. The guy I'm about to talk about is my number one in terms of ceiling, but in terms of just pure raw arm talent, it's Cam Ward. If that is what you're like, give me the dude with the most arm talent, that's Cam Ward. And saying all of that to say, Kevin Stefanski would hate this dude. I think he would get over it, but like, you see some of the faces he makes when Jameis does some of the things he's done in the first couple of games, and that's what Cam Ward is. I think he's got a little bit better arm than Jameis. Although, remember, Jameis came out as a number 1 overall pick. And he has a ton of natural talent.
I will say that we know, like you said, he's a gunslinger, so he's going to make some bad decisions. But I think as a prospect, I would almost prefer that over a guy who is really risk adverse. because I think it's easier to coach a guy to kind of tone down the aggressiveness than
Yeah.
to coach him to start taking chances if he doesn't really want to. So I think it wouldn't necessarily surprise me a lot if Ward can become a little bit more patient and methodical in the NFL, because I think that just lends itself more to coaching in the NFL than the other way around. That doesn't always happen. You see a lot of guys who are just basically the same that they are in college. They just force the ball into places that they shouldn't. They don't see defenders the way that they should. But I think for me, at least personally, I think I would prefer that to the other way around. Um, Additionally, I think that he is a guy who, again, like he's the kind of guy who you really have to like that style of player,
Yeah.
and he's got to fit in your offense. And I think a lot of quarterbacks nowadays come into college football, and because of the way that college offenses are structured, it's less down to down consistent.
Mhm.
Like you said, he likes to kind of fall away, throw off his back foot, because I think he's more comfortable just kind of like running around doing backyard football and just making a play. And I think that's how a lot of guys are right now. The era of players who are just going to drop back, stand in the pocket, survey the field, and make a decision, and that's it. There's not a whole lot of guys like that
No.
anymore. And I think that's both that probably goes back all the way to high school, but it also is a big contributor to that is the way that college offenses are right now, because the college game, as far as quarterbacks go, it's not a good preparation for NFL style football. And the solution is not to dumb down your NFL scheme to kind of replicate more of a spread college style. And I think the Browns kind of figured that out this year. That's not the way to go. You gotta uplift your talent and coach your guys to be able to execute NFL plays instead of trying to make it look more like the college game.
There was a question on the Barking Browns on Tuesday, and then I saw it posed again on All Eyes on Cleveland last night in the chat about like how many of these college, the guy was asking, yeah, how many of these college quarterbacks or which college quarterbacks play under center, and I was like, I wasn't on All Eyes on Cleveland. I was just participating in their chat, and I was sitting there going, I've watched all of these guys, at least a little bit. I've watched at least a game or two, a decent amount of like 10 or 15 of these guys. Like, and I'm like, I mean, I can remember some plays under center, but it's
Mhm.
like it's very interesting
Yep.
to kind of touch on that side. All
The
right, let's
profiles aren't pro style anymore. It's just
no, no. I
how
mean,
it is.
they do some of that stuff when they want to run the football and do play action and stuff, but
Yep.
it's not where they're based. Let's shift to the last guy before we switch off on some of our favorite guys. I'll start on this one just because I really like this guy. I want to talk about Jaylen Milroe, the Alabama quarterback. Has had a very roller coaster season, in my
Yeah.
opinion. Just a lot of highs, and when the highs have been very high, the lows have been pretty low, and they've gone all over the place. I think you kind of change offensive coordinators. You change. Did he change? Yeah, Tommy Reese was his offensive coordinator, right? Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
that's right. I think
that's
so.
right.
Yeah.
And he's with Cleveland. I just for a second I was thinking that he wasn't because he's the tight end coach for the Browns now. But so he changes offensive coordinators. You change the Nick Saban thing, and you can't underestimate the greatest college coach of all time not being your coach anymore. Some things are just different. Kalen DeBoer is a heck of a coach, not taking anything away from him. But that's just it's a big change. So it's been kind of if you want to talk about the toolsy player that has the highest ceiling, for me, it's Jaylen Milroe. Like this is a dude that there is so much that Georgia game, and I keep writing this every article I do that has Jaylen Milroe in it, I put this in there. That Georgia game was Lamar Jackson at Louisville. Like it was, and I think he's got a bigger arm. I think he's got a bigger arm. I think he can push it down the field a little bit more than Lamar can. And so that's kind of terrifying when you're talking about where the ceiling could go. You're like, man, this guy is physically really, really talented. You're talking about a dude that's what is he, 6'1, 6'2, somewhere in there, 225 pounds, and he can run a 4.3. Like you don't You just don't see that, man. He's got 16 rushing touchdowns, which is actually more than the 12 passing touchdowns that he had. Has he against LSU? He had 180 yards and 4 rushing touchdowns on 12 attempts last week, which is just absolutely.
Ridiculous.
I'm like, is he still running? Like, he still might be running on that field right now. I'm not 100% positive on that. Like, it's a his floor as a rusher. We talked about this. We talk about this all the time. His floor as a rusher is pretty high, and
Mhm.
Pete Smith has said the same thing on the OBR. Like, he thinks people are going to fall in love with Jaylen Milroe's tools, and I have. I just think that he can throw. He throws just such a beautiful deep ball. Um, he's a little inconsistent. 66% completion percentage, although his adjusted completion percentage is 76.7. He has a 79 passing grade for PFF, but the big thing that I want to point to is his 90 deep grade. That dude can sling it. If
Mhm.
he, especially if he has a chance to set up his feet, if he's on platform in the pocket, clean, able to drive the ball, he's going to drop it in buckets that people cannot drop, that other guys just cannot physically do it. So if you want a dude that has a high floor and an even higher ceiling, I think the tools of Jaylen Milroe, big live arm, inconsistent with accuracies against what was that game? It was a couple weeks ago. Was it they lost that game? Was it Tennessee? That Tennessee game, he couldn't hit the broadside of a barn. He couldn't. It was completely erratic. And part of that is because that Tennessee defensive line was getting after him in that game. So his pressure grade's a 56. That's where you got to work on it. You've
Yeah.
got to work on the pressure. He's just not, he's got, I think he threw 53 attempts in 22. So you can't really talk. So he's really a 2-year starter for all intents and purposes. We're talking about that. He's a guy that I think would benefit from going back to college, but like, if you're going to be he's going to be at worst the third quarterback taken, and he'll be taken in the top 10.
Mhm.
Do you want to go back? If he goes back, he's quarterback 1 going into next year, him and Garrett Nussmeier, if Nussmeier goes back. But my goodness, it's just that raw physical talent that he has is as good as anybody in this class.
Right. And I agree. And I think the Lamar Jackson comparisons are not entirely unwarranted because he's a special runner. I think the impact that Jackson has on him as far as his stock goes is really big. So I think if you didn't have the situation where Jackson, what was he, fifth quarterback taken in that class, I think,
Yes.
last pick of the first round. And I don't think anyone really expected him to fall that far, but I think at that point, that kind of player hadn't really succeeded at the NFL level.
Right.
And I think that was a risk that the Ravens took, but obviously it worked out really well for them. And I think that the fact that that worked for them, I think that plays into Milroe's favor significantly. Because if you could tell me, yeah, Milroe's going to last to the last pick of the first round, I'd be like, okay, that's my preferred route the Browns go this year. Like,
Mhm.
no doubt about it. That's not going to happen. There's no universe that happens. Like, he's going to go top 10. It would not surprise me if he's the first quarterback drafted because people are going to see his physical traits. His running ability is fantastic. Like you said, that's going to give him a high floor because of what he can do on the ground. Like, even if he never really develops as a passer, he's still going to be a threat to score like every time he has the ball just because he can run so well. Additionally, he has that really good deep ball. And I think that's a skill set that is going to be really valuable because if he can either run the ball or he can throw a deep throw and doesn't really do anything short intermediate, if he never develops that way, he could probably still be an NFL starter. Like, there's going to be a team who's like, we think we can still work with this guy because of what he offers in those two areas of the game. So, because of the impact that Jackson has had, where teams are like, okay, the archetype can succeed. Like, that has happened. That glass ceiling has been broken. I think Milroe ends up benefiting a lot from that. And I think he is going to go top 10. I think it's still a big risk because of like you said, inconsistent just from within structure, his accuracy under pressure. There's some issues there. He's not a complete prospect, but I mean, he's just a big ball of talent, and like the potential payoff of him of hitting on him, like if he can develop into a just a capable pocket passer while keeping that running ability, while keeping that ability to throw deep, like that is a dangerous football player, and your offense is going to just open up so much because of what he can do on the ground.
Yeah, it's fun to think about. I don't know if the Browns would go that route, but
You can easily talk yourself into like, okay, I can rationalize this. Yeah, like,
yeah,
is it the wisest thing? I don't know. Like, are you going to spend the fourth overall pick on that guy? Maybe, but
yeah,
like, you can talk yourself into doing it pretty easily.
easily. Like
He's that talented.
I'm really hoping this year is the first year I get to the combine and stuff, and I'm really interested to see some of those measurements because I think he could test off the
Oh
charts.
yeah.
I think it could be where he goes. All right, man. I wanted to do this where we kind of talk about some guys that are kind of not in the top three, kind of in that second tier, kind of guys that we really like. So I'm going to give you the floor, man. Give me one that maybe isn't getting the hype, but you think is worth it.
I got to be boring. I got to go with Kurtis Rourke.
That's fine. That's a fine
I
choice.
mean, I think I'm a little biased towards like classic throwback pocket passers because that's just what I grew up watching. You know, Drew Brees, Peyton Manning, like those guys. I just stylistically, I just always have an affinity for those guys. Beyond that, he's been really good this year. I mean, Indiana's what 10-0. Like no one saw that coming. Like they're a legitimate team now, and I think of maybe the biggest reason is how well he's playing. Um, he's just accurate. Like he's consistent and he's accurate and he's poised. Um, he's got a good arm. I wouldn't call it amazing, but it's good enough. It's not weak. He can move around a little bit. He can provide you a little bit on the ground. He's not Milroe, obviously, but he's not a statue. Like he can avoid pressure and he can give you a couple yards on the ground. And I think he's just a smart player. And I think like a lot of these things are going to sound like cliches, but like he exemplifies those like intangibles. He exemplifies those things that you look for in a quarterback. And I think right now, as like a consensus like fourth round player, I think if you're not 100% sold on any of these top three guys that we just got done talking about, where they're going to be taken, like if you're not like, okay, we definitely have to take this guy fourth overall. If you're not at that point, I think building up the rest of your roster, filling in some of these holes, trying to recoup some draft assets for the future moving forward, and then taking him maybe, third round if you can do it. I think that might be a smart idea because him in this offense right now, the way that he's able to see the field, I mean, that's something that his like coaches and scouts all say, like he's really smart as a processor. Like he knows the playbook and he knows how that interacts with the defense and where his receivers are going to be open. Like that sounds exactly like what Kevin Stefanski wants, because as we all know, ever since he arrived in Cleveland, consistently open receivers. Like watch the all 22. It's there like every single play. Guys are open. It's just a matter of the quarterback being able to get the ball to them. And we saw that happen for the second half of 2020. And look how good, like they almost beat the Chiefs that year. Like with just good quarterback play. Like I know Mayfield was amazing that year, but just like good quarterback play. And I think that's what Rourke can give you. He doesn't have the ceiling of some of these other guys. But I think as far as who he can be just on a down-to-down basis, just distributing the football, I like what he can offer, and I like what he could look like in this offense.
Yeah, no, like you sent me that stat a week or so ago. He was like the top graded quarterback under pressure. Like he's he sees the ball, he sees the field very well. He's seen so much football. Like he's got 10,000 career passing yards in college.
Yep.
Like he has played so much football. And kind of I'll piggyback off of that for my guy. Oregon's Dylan Gabriel. Now I am a Dylan Gabriel known hater. That is a thing going into this year that I was like, some people, I remember when Cam Ward started coming onto the scene, I was like, man, this guy, I put him at quarterback 3 quickly and then moved him up and was talking about him. But I can remember a lot of times I was like, I got a new quarterback too. People were like, is it Jaylen Gabriel? And I'm like, no. And then, and then it kind of dawned on me, look at the 2 rookies that are in winning situations right now, Jaden Daniels and Bo Nix. What is something that those 2 have in common with Kurtis Rourke and Dillon Gabriel? All 4 of them have played a ton of football. Dillon Gabriel is about to break. I think he needs 2 more games. He will break Bo Nix's start record for college quarterbacks. And it's hilarious because he'll do it at the same school that Bo Nix broke the record at with Oregon. You talked about it, man. Like, they're not developing quarterbacks like they used to in the NFL. And if they don't come, and I know they're not getting them pro ready necessarily in college, but if they don't come with a lot of starts, a lot of these second tier guys are not panning out. They can't be learning some of the intricacies, the small intricacies of the game on the fly because NFL teams don't have patience for that. Dillon Gabriel's smaller, man. He's going to come in at 5'11", but this dude is the guy, by the way, that is tied with Shedeur Sanders with the highest adjusted completion percentage in college football right now at 81.9. Risk adverse as all get out. He's second behind Shedeur with a 1.6% turnover worthy play percentage, 4.1% on his big time throw percentage. So he's not up there, but this dude, I was reading Dame Parson from Bleacher Report. He wrote a couple of days ago an updated scouting report on Dillon Gabriel that I thought was really, really good. He's a point guard at quarterback. Mm-hmm. He is going to distribute the ball. I know. As soon as he said that, I was like, oh my, yep, I got to write that down every time I talk about Dillon Gabriel.
Classic point guard, not the Steph Curry or the Darius Garland, like the guy who just his job, like Steve Nash, I guess would be a good way to put it, right? Just gets the ball to the guys he needs to. Like, let them do their job. My responsibility is to make them better.
Or like a vintage Chris Paul, when Chris Paul would have like 20 assists in a game, like something crazy like that. He's accurate. He's not going to take risks with the football. He's mobile enough. Throws the ball well on the run. He can also hurt you. Like, he can take off, and he has like a 45-yard touchdown this year. Like, he'll take off and he'll do those things. He's got 727 yards on deep passes. He doesn't have a cannon by any stretch of the imagination, but I would put him up there. I would call his arm an NFL arm. And I think he can make those throws that he needs to attack all 3 levels. He can crumble a little bit under pressure, but he is absolutely a Kevin Stefanski quarterback to me. He does what you ask him to. He will take some chances, but he won't take a lot of boneheaded chances that really frustrate you because it's just not his game. He's smart. He's efficient. He's one of the more accurate passers in this class. And I think if you're in that range, man, like you talked about, I think he's in that Kurtis Rourke range for me. Pick 96 or whatever it is that comes from Buffalo. That's when I would start entertaining these guys. Mm-hmm. And if there's somebody else you really want, and then you get to the top of the 4th and Kurtis Rourke or Dillon Gabriel's there in the early hundreds, I think it's a slam dunk. You run that card up to the table. I think because if one of those guys doesn't work out, you just take a high quarterback in 26. It's fine.
Yeah.
But like, if you want exactly, you just highlighted it so well with Rourke. If you want a guy that will make Kevin Stefanski a very happy man, Kurtis Rourke, Dillon Gabriel, that's what I got.
Mm-hmm. You could definitely see a situation where those guys are succeeding, maybe not making the biggest splash plays, but like just leading drives down the field, just like getting the ball to these playmakers. Like, they're open, the chances are there, they're schemed in, they're going to continue to be schemed in. We've seen that for 5 years now. You just got to get them the ball. And I think either of those guys, Rourke or Gabriel, can do that.
Yeah, it's just make the plays that are in front of you. That's
not rocket science.
We've been begging for guys to just take the plays in front of them, and that's what these guys do. Like, oh, there's a guy right there. And I like Dillon Gabriel because it would really throw me off when he was left-handed. The first time he would drop back, I'd be like, whoa.
Oh yeah.
Just because I'm a weird guy like that. But Sam, appreciate you so much for taking this time and for the collab on the OBR website, guys. got a lot of great reactions to the quarterback piece. So we're really happy that you guys are checking it out and you're liking it. We're going to knock out the next couple of ones here before too long. Make sure you're subscribed to the YouTube channel, and we'll see you guys again next time.